Hello and welcome back to Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and I am back today with another sew along, and in today's video we are sewing the Cashmerette Kimball Bomber Jacket. So this pattern is an intermediate pattern. It features bust darts, all of the cup size options that come with Cashmerette patterns, the option for quilted sleeves, and then it uses knit fabric for the cuffs, the bottom, and the neckband of the jacket. Full zip. It's got zippered welt pockets on the side. A really fun jacket to dive into. It is unlined, but the pocket finishes are really, really nice on the inside. So this pattern is meant for intermediate, but if you are an adventurous beginner, I think you could totally handle it. I am holding your hand through this entire project, but the pattern company does classify this as an intermediate pattern. For your fabrics, you are going to want a mid to heavyweight fabric for the body of the jacket. This could be a brocade, it could be a wool, it could be denim, it could be a cotton twill, such as I am using, anything that you think would make a nice structured jacket. In addition to the main fabric of the pattern, the main fabric of the pattern, you are also going to need a lightweight a lightweight woven for the lining of the sleeves if you are choosing to do the quilted sleeve version, of which I'll be holding your hand and walking you through how to do the quilting on the fabric to then create the quilted sleeves. But something a little bit lightweight that is also slippery. So something like a Bimberg rayon, a crepe, something that goes easily over if you've got a sleeve on underneath that jacket sleeve. I'm actually using a silk charmeuse for my lining of my sleeves because I had some in my stash, but you just want something with a little slick so that it easily goes on and off over your sleeves. In addition, you're going to want some batting, 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch low loft batting, preferably a natural fiber, so like a wool or a cotton batting for the quilting aspect of that. And then finally, you're going to want some knit for the neckband, the cuffs, and the lower band. Knitted rib or rib trim all works. You want a maximum of 40 to 50% stretch because you really want that fabric to suck back in. You want really good recovery on that rib knit. So a nice heavy duty knit rib for those cuffs, neckband, and lower band. Alternatively, if you are having a hard time finding something like that, you can use a Ponte or a Scuba for those areas. And I have made this jacket before and I have used those, so they work a treat. There are a few other notions that you are also going to need, but we'll go over those here in a second at the cutting table. If you would like to get your hands on the Kimball Bomber Jacket, this is a Cashmerette Club pattern. It is an older one, which it means you will need to have the all access tier of the Cashmerette Club in order to have access to this pattern. This is something that I pay my own money for. It doesn't only include all the previous patterns that have come before it, or the patterns that are yet to come each month, but it also includes some free classes, or included, not free, they're included in your membership classes, a community, some discounts, all sorts of things. And I think it is very well worth the money. It is something that I, again, have paid for with my own money almost since its inception, and it's one of my favorite things to look forward to each month. All right. Machines. I'm going to be using my Bernina 790 Plus on this entire project. You do not need to have a serger or anything else. A regular home sewing machine will work just fine. My machine is on loan to me from University of Sewing, and I thank them very kindly for allowing me to work on this beautiful and wonderful machine. But yeah, other than that, there's a few other supplies and notions, and we're going to go over those now.
All right, let's go through our pieces, what we need to have prepped, how we need to have them prepped, all of that jazz, the supplies and everything that we are going to need to sew up our Kimball Bombers. All right, let's start with piece 1, which is our front. And you're going to have one A, B, or C, depending on which cup sizes you are using. I'm using the GH here, so I have piece 1C. This is the front. We need 2 of these cut out of the regular main fabric. I am using a cotton twill for my main fabric, so it's a heavier weight fabric. We need to mark our pocket placement both on the right side and the wrong side. And on the wrong side, I have added a piece of interfacing that is 1.5 inches wide and 6 5/8 of an inch long. And this is included in the instructions for this are included in the pattern. And I've also marked the box of my pocket on the wrong side. Really, the box on the wrong side is helpful for placing the interfacing. When we're actually sewing it on, the pocket pieces become a little bit more important. So anyway, I've got it marked though on the wrong side and the right side of the fabric. This is with a friction pen that is, will go away with heat. I've also marked my dart points. I've marked all of my notches. If you are using a fabric that is a little bit lighter weight, you can actually add a little piece of interfacing here to the bottom of the tab. And the pattern recommends doing a box of 3 inches by 3 3/8. So the lower end of the tab. So you may want to add that little box right here to the lower part of the tab if you are using a lighter weight fabric. Again, this is a cotton twill, so I'm not worried about that. All right, that is piece 1. Piece 2 is our back piece, also cut out of our main fabric. We need one of these cut on the fold, and that's what I've got here. Mark your notches, your sleeve notches, your side notches. Also mark center front, center back on both. I make a little notch on the fold on both the top and the bottom here so that when we're attaching the ribbing and the collar, we've got reference points. Piece 3 is our pocket piece, and we are going to need 4 of these. I have cut this out of a lighter weight cotton. You can use the same slippery fabric that you're using for your sleeve lining if you're doing the quilted sleeve. You absolutely can do that. I just find it much easier to sew in these zippered welts if you've got a more stable fabric. So I've gone, and this is a fun pop of color, but you could also use a color that matches the inside of your jacket. These pockets get finished off really nicely on the inside though. But I have got these cut, 4 of these, and on 2 of these, we need to mark that zipper pocket marking, just on 2, because the other 2 are going to be the back side of the pocket bags on each side. So we're not going to need those. But on 2 of the pieces, 1 for each side, we are going to need that box drawn out on the wrong side of the fabric. You can go ahead and do it on both sides if that makes you feel better. So 4 of those. Next is piece 4. Now this is our sleeve piece. If you are not quilting your sleeve, or if you're using a quilted fabric that does not require quilting, you can go ahead and cut out your sleeve. You need 2 of these out of your regular fabric. If you are quilting the sleeve, which I'm going to be doing for this sew along, you are not cutting out the sleeve yet. You are going to be cutting out a very large rectangle. What I did was I laid my pattern piece down on the fabric and then just cut a rectangle around where I had at least a couple of inches on each side of the sleeve pattern, and I cut a rectangle out of this. For this, if you're doing the quilting, so we'll cut this out of the pattern piece once we have done the quilting. So you just need a big rectangle for now. Of this, you need 2 layers of your slippery fabric. I'm using a silk charmeuse because I can, because I had it in my stash. But a Bimberg rayon, anything that's nice and slippery, it just makes getting your jacket on and off over other layers much easier if you've got a slipperier fabric. You need 2 rectangles cut of that, 2 rectangles cut of your main fabric. So here is my cotton twill. I've got 2 rectangles cut of that, and then 2 little rectangles of a lightweight cotton batting. This is maybe this is 1/4 of an inch. Cotton batting, wool batting. You want to use natural batting that we're going to be using. So when we quilt these, we're going to be sandwiching this batting in between a layer of the main fabric and a layer of the slippery fabric. So in my case, this silk charmeuse. Anyway, and so we'll be quilting these panels because quilting will make the piece shrink up a little bit. And then once we've done the quilting, we will lay our pattern pieces out and then cut out those pieces. So let's not worry about that for now. We will get to that point in the pattern when that comes. But that is what we're doing about the sleeve. And then we need piece 5, which is our cuff. For this, I am using a knit ribbing, a heavier weight. You want something with really good recovery, so you don't want more than 40 to 50% stretch horizontally, because you want something a little bit beefier. If you cannot find ribbing, this that I used was cut by the yard, but a lot of times it's tubular, meaning it's in a tube. Anyway, that's fine. A lot of times knit ribbing comes that way, especially rib knit, specifically meant for cuffs and that sort of thing. You can also use cuffing, but that needs to be at least 6 inches high because it gets folded over on itself. What else? You can also use Ponte. Ponte works really, really well, or Scuba for this, as if you can't find good ribbing or some maybe a color that you like that matches, or maybe you just want to use your scraps. You can absolutely use Ponte, and I've done that on a previous Kimball I made. So that is kind of that. But you need 2 of these, piece 5, 2 of these cuff pieces cut out of your ribbing. For piece 6, this is the neckband. You need 1 of these cut out of your ribbing, whatever you're using for your ribbing. Piece 7 is your lower back band. So we need 1 of these cut on the fold out of our ribbing. And I've cut my notches, but I've also cut center back here. Just a little notch in the top and bottom of that. Piece 8 is our front lower band, and you actually need to cut 2 of these for a left side and a right side. And yeah, 2 of these, lower front band, piece 8. And then finally, piece 9, which is our zipper facing. You are going to need 2 of these cut out of your main fabric, and these do need to be interfaced. So I have interfaced the wrong side of both of those because a zipper is going to be going in there. So we want that to be nice and stabilized. So there we have it. Those are all of the pieces that we have for our Kimball. Okay, alternatively, with piece 9, which is our zipper facing, cut out your 2 pieces of fabric out of your main fabric, and then cut out 2 pieces out of your interfacing, but do not fuse them together. I'm going to show you a way how to do a really cool clean finish on the outer edge of the facing when we get to that part. You can fuse them together, and I'll talk you through how to finish off that edge. But if you would like to follow along with the pattern on this kind of fun way to do this, do not fuse your interfacing to your fabric yet. But you will cut out 2 of the interfacing and 2 of the main fabric. In addition, we have got some, actually a number, more than normal amount of notions that we are going to need. Let me grab all these. We are going to need a needle, and I am using a size 16 Schmetz Microtex for my sewing because I'm using a thicker fabric. We're going to need thread. I'm using regular Gutermann Sew All or Gutermann Mara 100 for all of my sewing. I'm using a contrasting thread so you can easily see what I'm doing, but it's totally up to you. We need 1 22-inch long separating zipper, which I have got here in this olive green that matches the outside of my coat. We need 2 7-inch jacket or 2 7-inch pocket zippers. So these are not separating zippers. These have a fixed bottom here. You can have a longer piece of zipper for this. That's fine, but it needs to be at least 7-inch, closed end is what I was trying to say. It needs to be at least a 7-inch long zipper. If we have extra, we'll cut it off the top when we get to that point, and I will tell you that when we get there. But a 7-inch zipper will fit really nicely inside that welt pocket. Again, I'm using contrast so you can easily see what I'm doing. And then we need at least 7 yards of 1/2-inch wide double folded bias tape, which I have got here. So this is all ready to go. So double folded bias tape, get an end here, is when it is, you can get single folded, but it needs to be wider. Because when it is folded over on itself, like so, we want it, that's when it's double folded in order to wrap our seams. You can also make your own bias tape. So you need 1.5-inch wide strips of lightweight cotton or something to use for those bias strips. I obviously am using pre-made bias tape for mine. You can also finish off your seams with a serger if you wanted to. So this is kind of optional for this, but I will be showing you how to use the bias tape on this one. Additionally, we're going to want a zipper foot, because we're putting in 2 different types of zippers, and obviously the washable marker in order to mark our pocket placements, point turner, tailor's ham, or some kind of rolled up towel in order to do our pressing, and a walking foot. It's optional. A walking foot is optional, but if you are quilting the sleeves, I highly recommend a walking foot. You can get a generic one for any machine that is out there, and they really aren't that expensive. So for the generic ones. So I would highly recommend a walking foot. That's going to make the quilting process so much easier. All right, that's everything we need for this project. Let's gather everything up and go over to the sewing machine. Okay, so it's time to start sewing. So we need pieces 1, I've got 1C here, and piece 2, which is our back. So our front pieces and our back pieces. We're going to be doing some stay stitching before we do anything else. So this is just going to be securing that neckline so that when, the collar and stuff gets sewn in, nothing is stretching out of place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at my shoulder line, and I'm going to sew to center front on both fronts. And then on the back, I am going to start at the shoulder, sew to the center, and then start at the other shoulder and sew to the center. And I'm sewing this line of stay stitching at 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm just using my regular 2.5 millimeter stitch length. So we're sewing within the seam allowance. Our seam allowances are 1/2 inch. So let me go to the machine and do that real quick, and then I'll come back and we're going to work on our pockets. All right. Once our necklines are all stay stitched, and you can see I've got orange on one, my top thread, and white on my bobbin thread. But all of my necklines are now stabilized. I can tell right side from wrong side on my fabric. I know it's not going to read that way on the camera though, so I have put washi tape on the wrong side of each of my pieces so you can easily see what's right side and what's wrong side. But I've got my neckline stay stitched here. And again, I started at the shoulders and went to the center. So I'm going to take piece 2, which is the back, and I'm just going to set it aside for now, because we are going to be working on our pockets. So we will need our piece 1, which are our fronts, and our piece 3, which are our pockets. And we've got 4 of these cut out of whatever lining or, whatever we're using here. And on 2 of those 4 pieces, I have got my box for my zipper drawn out. The other 2, I do not, because they're going to be the back side of the pocket, which you'll see what I'm talking about here in a little bit. But I don't have that marked out there. But again, the washi tape indicates the wrong side. So the 2 pieces without the box, I'm going to set those aside. And actually, one of the pieces with the box we can set aside as well. But we want to take one of our fronts, and this is right side up, and I've got my box drawn on my right side here. And we're going to take one of our pocket pieces, and let me orientate myself here. This goes this way. Yes. Like so. And that is correct. Yes. Okay. All right. So I'm going to put my other pocket piece aside. So we're going to we've marked our box here on the front. We've got our box marked here on the back. We have it interfaced on the wrong side. And we've got our pocket piece with our pocket opening here cut out as well. So what we are going to do is we are going to match up our box here with our box that we have drawn on our front, and we are putting these right sides together. So this is the right side of the fabric facing up. This is the right side of my pocket that I'm putting down. So we're right sides together. And I'm just going to take a pin and I'm going to put it right through the corner of this box, and then match it to the corner underneath. And pin. And I'll do the same down here. Just really want to make sure. Again, I'm using ink that will go away when I iron it. But we want that lined up all nice and neat so that our pockets are also symmetrical. And then you could do the same on the other corners. And those should line up really well, and they do. All right, once I've got that pinned, so I know that my boxes match up really nicely, I'm just gonna take a couple of pins and just pin this pocket bag to the front, but that's away enough from the box so it's not getting in the way of my presser foot. Okay. All right. Oops. Once we've got that all pinned in place, let's go over to the sewing machine and we're going to do some stitching. Okay, so the instructions want you to, I'm sliding this all underneath my machine. I've just got a regular foot on my machine. I do have dual feed on my machine, but you don't need that. We're going to be sewing all the way around this box. Now the instructions have you just using a regular 2.5 for the long sides and then going down to a 1.5 stitch length for the corners. I honestly like to do a 1.5 around the entire thing. I just think it makes the pocket a little bit more stable for this step. And then when we're top stitching things in place, all that jazz, then we can use the longer 2.5. But definitely use the 1.5 around the corners. But I'm gonna start arbitrarily somewhere in the middle of the long edge. And I am taking my stitch length down to a 1.5. And we're going to start stitching, and I'm gonna back stitch as I go. And I am just sewing right along those lines that I drew. And I'm going through all the layers of the fabric. So I'm sewing through the pocket and through the front of the jacket. And I'm gonna go very slowly when I come up to this first corner. And when we get up to that first corner, it even helps to even hand crank so that we hit right on that corner, which is right there. Now I'm gonna lift up my presser foot and I'm gonna pivot. And as I'm sewing across this first short end, I'm gonna count my stitches. Okay, nine stitches I did across the bottom. That's important because that's how many stitches I wanna do when I get to this other end. So now we're gonna sew all the way back down. And then we're sewing back to where we started and back stitching. Okay, do the same to the other side, the other pocket, and I will meet you back at the pressing station. Okay, once we have got our box sewn, we're now going to cut it open. So I've got some really sharp scissors with really sharp points, and I'm just going to pick this up. We just want to cut right in the center, and we are sewing through all layers of fabric. So we're sewing or cutting through the front as well as the pocket. And once we've got a hole cut, we can just cut right up the middle. There we go. And when we get about a half of an inch away from our corners, we are just going to clip to, but not through. That's where these sharp points come in really handy. Okay. And once we have done that, we're going to take our pocket bag and we are going to push it through to the wrong side. And now we're going to give everything a really good press from both, well, maybe, from both the wrong side and the right side. So I like to start at one short end. And we want to make sure that our lining fabric is not poking through to the right side. So now we have a little window where our zipper needs to go. So we are going to take one of our zippers and I am going to place some Wonder Tape, which is just a double stick tape. Always store your Wonder Tape in a Ziploc bag or a plastic sealed bag. I thought I had one of these open, but I guess I don't. All right, so you can definitely pin this in place. I just find this Wonder Tape so much easier. And I'm just going to line this up along the edge of my zipper tape. This is 1/4 of an inch wide. Give it a really good press. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. Okay, then I'm going to be taking off the tape, off the paper. So now we've just got the glue that's left. And we're going to position our zipper into our window. So what we want to do is we're going to take this back behind here and we're going to line up the bottom of our zipper tape, or the bottom of our zipper, the stop that's there. This is going to get very sticky very quickly. We want to line that up with the bottom of this window. And I'm centering the zipper in the window as best as I possibly can. Then I'm just going to unzip the zipper. Zip it up a little bit because we want it to end right at the top. So if you're using, remember I said you could use zipper that is longer. That's where this is coming into play. So we want that zipper stop to be right there showing, but we can shorten it up here where the pull stops at the top. And I've got the zipper stop down here at the, down by the bottom. And then I want, when it's closed, I want my zipper up here towards the top. Okay. Once that is glued in place, and you can give that a really good press, we're going to go to the machine and we're going to top stitch this all the way around 1/8 of an inch away from that window with our 2.5 stitch length. So let's go over and do that. Okay, I've taken my stitch length back up to a 2.5. We do want to make sure, just flip things over. Make sure everything is lying nice and flat on the back as well. We'll trim off our excess zipper here in a minute. And just like when we were sewing our box earlier, I'm going to start on one of the, I've just unthreaded my machine. I am going to start on one of the long sides of the box, and then we will count our stitches at the bottom. When I get up close to my zipper pull, I'm actually going to stop, raise my presser foot, open that zipper so that it's not in the way. And I did 8 stitches across the bottom, so that's what I want to do here across the top. All right, let's go back to the pressing table and take a look at this. All right, so this is what it looks like from the front. We've got our top stitched zipper in place. We unzip it. We've just got the back. There's not a bag there yet. So when we flip this over to the wrong side, we can see there's our pocket piece. We can trim off our excess zipper tape now. I've got mine's glued because of that Wonder Tape. I'm just going to, with crappy scissors, cut this so that at least it's inside the pocket bag. Nice and neat. Okay. Once we've done that, we're going to flip this back over, open up our zipper, and we want to pull that pocket back to the right side, maybe. And it is not going to sit nice. That's fine, because we've got things top stitched and it's going to be weird. But when we pull it out of this bag, it is going to be wrong side up. Again, it is really going to look like a mess. That's okay. We're French seaming the pocket. So we just want to make sure we've got all 4 of those edges turned out. Even if it looks like the pocket has kind of thrown up on itself. That's fine. That is fine. All right. So now this is wrong side up. So we are going to take the corresponding, remember those other 2 pieces that we cut for the pocket? We want to take the one that corresponds. And remember, wrong side is my washi tape. And we're going to pin these wrong sides together. So here's that angle. And again, this doesn't look pretty, but that's okay. It will at the end. So I'm just going to put pins, and I'm pinning all 4 sides of the pocket together with wrong sides together. Matching up those raw edges. Okay, once all that is pinned, we're going to go back to the machine and we're going to sew all 4 sides with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So let's go do that. All right, so we're just going to carefully go around the pocket bag here at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, 2.5 stitch length. Just making sure that we are only sewing what we mean to sew and that our raw edges are staying nice and lined up together. All right, so once we've got those pocket bag pieces sewn wrong sides together, let's go back to the pressing table and we are going to trim them and press them and sew them again. All right, once we've got our pockets sewn on all 4 sides, we are going to come back and we are just going to trim those seam allowances and trim your seam allowances to 1/8 inch very carefully. You don't want to accidentally trim something you don't mean to. So we're basically just cutting that seam allowance in half. Okay, once we've trimmed all of our edges, I've got a double pointed needle here that I'm going to use as a point turner. But we're just going to take all those pocket pieces now and we're going to stuff them back to the wrong side. I'm going to pull my tape off because it's not needed now. And I'm just taking my fingers and kind of poking out those corners of the pocket. Then we can take our point turner and poke those out a little bit better. All right, now we can flip our jacket over here, and this is the wrong side. Actually, before I do that, I'm actually gonna zip up my pocket. Now we've got our pocket almost done. We're gonna basically finish the French seam. So unzipped, we just see the back of the pocketing piece. Now it's zipped up. All right. So now that we've poked all of our corners out, I'm just gonna take my iron, press that flat. I think you can see why I prefer to use something very stable like a cotton for this pocket piece instead of the slippery fabric that I'm going to be using for my sleeve lining. Okay, the final step is that we are going to do that second step of a French seam. So we're going to sew around the perimeter of the pocket again at 1/4 inch to enclose that raw edge on the inside. So let's go back to the machine, sew that second line of stitching all the way around, and then our pockets are done. Okay, so we're taking our pocket piece, we're pulling that away, we're only sewing through the pocket piece, and we are sewing that again at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just being very careful to keep the jacket front out of the stitching line. Okay, trim your threads, and then let's go back to the pressing station and we will take a look at our finished pockets. All right, so our pockets are all sewn. The raw edges have all been encased. We can give that another good press. It's kind of hard with the zipper on the other underneath. But there it is from the wrong side, and then from the right side. We've got lots of little threads everywhere. We can give it another good press. And then when we unzip our zipper, we've got our pocket, and our raw edges are all nice and encased in there. So do the same thing to the other side, and then I will meet you back here for the next step. Okay, once we've got our pockets done, it is time to sew our bust darts. So that is what we're going to do now. So we're just going to flip our fronts over. So we've got wrong side facing up. I'm going to take my notches that I cut into those dart legs, and I'm just going to match those up right sides together so that those notches now match at the side seam. I'm going to pop a pin in. You can draw your dart legs in if you wish, but I'm going to show you how I like to do darts. And then I'm going to pop a pin in at the tip of the dart that I also marked on my pattern. So that is what it looks like. Everything's kind of folded over, and we're going to sew our dart right here. And again, I'm going to show you my trick for that. So let's do that on both sides, and I'll meet you back at the sewing machine. Okay, so the way I like to sew my darts, I'm going to take this top thread and I'm going to pull a really long piece out. And I'm going to start right at those notches, and I'm just going to sew a couple of stitches, back stitch, and then sew just a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to stop, lift up that presser foot, and I'm going to take this long string that I pulled, and I'm just pulling it to where it matches up to that pin that I've put at the end of the dart. And now I'm just going to follow that line of thread, so that acts as my dart leg. And then when we get to the bottom here, right when I get to the fold of the fabric, I'm going to sew, lift up, needle down, lift up, turn the work, sew back along that fold for about an inch, inch and a half, and then back stitch into the dart bulk. I'll show you what that looks like. So that is what that line of stitching looks like. It just gives a much better point to the dart, I think. All right, do that on both sides, and then I'll meet you back at the pressing station. All right, once we've got that dart sewn, like we've got here, we're gonna set it over a tailor's ham or your rolled up towel, and we're gonna press that dart bulk down towards the hem. And I like to press it from the wrong side and also from the right side. Oops. All right, I'm going to do that on the other side, and then we're going to talk about binding our seams. Okay, once our bust darts are done, it is now time to finish the seam allowances on our shoulder seams and our side seams, both the front and the back. And we can do this a couple of ways. We can bind those seams, and this is just the single fabric binding, which I'm going to show you how to do. That's what I'm going to do. Or you can finish those off with the serger or the faux overlocker on your sewing machine, or even a zigzag stitch. It is really up to you how you would like to finish those off, but I'm going to show you how to use binding, which is a really nice and clean finish. Okay, so I'm going to show you on one of the shoulder seams, and then I will show you exactly what seams all need to be finished. Now, you can start doing this on the wrong side of the fabric or the right side of the fabric. I prefer to sew the first pass along the wrong side of the fabric and then press it over to the right side of the fabric so that my top stitching's on the right side, but completely up to you. But you're going to want to cut a piece of your bias tape a couple of inches longer than your seam. And if you're using pre-made, it's already been folded to the wrong side, folded in. I'm going to unfold one edge, and I'm going to pin it right side of the tape, and I'm pinning it to the wrong side of my piece here, my shoulder piece, as you can tell with my tape here. But again, you can do it the other way around. The instructions tell you to do it the other way around. I like this better because then your top stitching looks nice and neat on the right side. So we're going to pin it here, and we're just going to sew at 1/4 of an inch, and that is actually this pressed edge here. Sew at 1/4 of an inch all the way across that top. So let's go do that. Okay, so I have sewn it, the right side of the tape to the wrong side of the pattern piece at 1/4 of an inch, as you can see there. And now we are going to press this up away from that shoulder seam. Then we're going to turn it over. So here's the right side. And I'm going to fold it over until it covers that stitch line that's there that we just sewed. So we have just bound that raw edge in bias tape. So we have not taken away any of these seam allowance, added to any of the seam allowance. It is all good. And I'm going to take clips actually and clip those, because now I can go back to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch an 1/8 of an inch away from this folded edge, and I'm going to sew another line to sew that binding down. So let me go do that and I'll be right back. All right, so we have now, we've now sewn that down. So our, and it doesn't matter that it's messy on the back, because when that gets pressed open, it'll look nice and neat. So now we have got our one shoulder seam bound here. We're going to be binding both shoulder seams, and we can trim our excess here now. We're going to be doing this to both shoulder seams on the front, both shoulder seams on the back, and then both side seams on the front and back. And then we want to set our pattern piece back up and remark the notches that get lost once we've bound those raw edges. So go ahead and do that on all 4 shoulder seams and all 4 side seams, front and back, and then I will meet you back here for the next step. Okay, so once everything is bound, it is going to look like this. We have got our back, here's the right side. with both shoulder seams bound and both side seams bound, otherwise finished. You know, if you're doing a serger or whatever, go ahead and finish those off. But I've got mine bound. And then on my front pieces, I've got shoulder and side seam, and that is taking in that dart bulk there, the side of the dart on both sides. So now what we can do is we can put our, really we just need our back piece. We don't have a notch that we need to mess with on our front, but we need the notch that's going to match with our bust dart. So we can take our pattern piece and you can mark it with a piece of chalk or, you know, whatever. I am just going to take a pen and mark it. And now we are ready for our next step, which is sewing our shoulder seams together. So I'm going to lay my back right side up here. And then I'm going to put a front right side together, and I'm matching my shoulders. And then I'm going to put my other front right sides together for the other side and pop in some pins. Okay, I am going to go to the machine and using my 2.5 millimeter stitch length, I'm going to sew these seams together at 1/2 inch. So let me go sew those seam allowances and I'll meet you right back here. Okay, once our shoulder seams are sewn, we are going to stick them on your towel or your ham, and we are just going to press those seam allowances open. And look how lovely those bound seams look. Okay. It is now time, if you are quilting your sleeves, now is the time to do that. So I'm going to get all of the all my stuff together, and we are going to quilt our sleeves and get those cut out. Okay, so now it is time to do our quilting for our sleeves. So we've got our sleeve pattern, we're going to set it aside. And then we've got our rectangles here. So I've got my lining rectangles. I'm going to set those aside. We don't need those right now. My main fabric rectangles that we're going to be working with right now, and then my batting rectangles. Batting rectangles can also be set aside for a minute. So what we're going to do is I'm going to first draw in some quilting lines. We're going to quilt both rectangles, and then we will come back and cut out our sleeve pieces with those. So I am just going to take one, and you are show you how I'm going to do this. I am going to be doing a diamond shape basically. So I have cut this pretty close to straight and on grain. And I am going to be using a friction pen, which goes away with heat. Test though to make sure that whatever form, you know, if you're using chalk, a pen, water soluble, whatever you're using, that it actually goes away when you are, when it's supposed to, so that you don't have things stuck on your fabric. But I am just making a line, and I am, what I'm doing here is I am lining up my clear ruler with I'm going to start here at one corner. And I've taken a 2-inch box that's here in my clear ruler and lined up a corner and a corner. You don't have to make your lines, you don't even have to do straight lines. You could do swirlies or quilt it however you want if you're a quilter. And I am now, once I've got that first line, this is not a perfect square, it's a rectangle, so this isn't going to go from corner to corner. just like so. I've drawn my first line. Now I'm just going to go every 2 inches going one way. Once we've drawn lines going one way, now I am going to go the other way. Okay, once my quilting lines are drawn, again, they can look like whatever you would like, I'm going to baste my layers together using a quilt basting spray. This is a pattern and stencil adhesive from Spray and Bond. I'll leave a link to it in the description box if you're curious. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this off camera because I need to do it in a ventilated area. But I am going to take my batting. I'm going to spray this. I'm going to lay it nice and flat, spray this all over it, and then lay my lining very carefully on top of that, like this, smoothing it out as I go so that everything is laying nice and smooth and on grain. Let it dry, and then I'm going to flip over my batting, spray the other side, and I'm putting the wrong side of the lining onto the batting, right side, whatever, to the batting. Then I'm going to spray the other side of the batting and put my fashion fabric, wrong side of my fashion fabric, against the batting. Get it all nice and smooth, and then let it dry. So I'm going to glue it, but all the sandwich together with the spray adhesive, and I'm going to be spraying the batting both times. I'm also going to go ahead and put some pins in once that's nice and dry, but go ahead and do that. Make your quilting lines, spray baste your layers together, and then I will meet you back here for the next step. Okay, so here's what we've got. We have got our quilt sandwich. So we've got our lining, and it is right side down, and then the wrong side of the lining is glued to the batting, and then the wrong side of the outer layer is also glued to the batting. So it goes right side of lining, wrong side of lining, batting, batting, wrong side of outer layer, right side of outer layer. And our outer layer has got our quilting lines that are on here. Now, the instructions do tell you, I'm not a quilter, just for all, just to say that, because I know a lot of you guys out there might be. I am not a quilter, but we have everything glued together, and so I've just put some pins in here just for, just to help all the layers stay together, especially as we take this over to the sewing machine. But I'm going to start at one of the center lines, and we are going to sew with a 4mm stitch length one way, and I'm going to go from one end down to the other end, and then I'll flip it and go from this end up to this end. But we're going to go do all one line, and then I'll flip it and do the cross lines, and we'll just pull pins out as we go. But I'm putting a walking foot on my machine, and again, a 4.0mm stitch length for that. And we are just gonna keep checking our underlayer, which is our lining, to make sure we're not getting any puckers or anything that we don't mean to get. So let's go to the sewing machine and sew that. Okay, so we're gonna start with one of the center lines. And my machine is going to backstitch at the beginning and ending of each line because that's the setting I've got it on. You don't have to do that though. You don't have to do any backstitching here because we'll cut out the sleeve when we're finished quilting, and then those seam lines will be cut anyway, and then they'll get sewn into the other stuff, so you don't have to worry about that. But my machine is going to do the backstitch. So we're just going to start at one of the center lines, and we're just going to start following our lines that we drew. Now I am going to roll up, especially while we're working on these center lines, the edge. I have a pretty wide throat plate, or oh my gosh, my arm. I've got a pretty wide space here, but underneath my arm of my machine. But that is not the case for a lot. So just roll up any of that extra while you're going. I also have a tripod that I'm sewing into as I go forward, which most of you would not have that. Okay, I'm going to go to the next line over. I'm going to start at the same side and sew another line of stitching. This is the time where you just put on an audiobook or a movie or music and just sew. Mindless sewing. Okay, to keep the quilting balanced, again, I'm not a quilter, this is just what the instructions are saying, I'm going to turn the work this time, and we're going to sew from the other way down. And do 2 lines going this way. Okay, I'm just going to continue, you don't need to watch me, sewing these lines, all going this direction, and I will keep turning the work, so I'm starting at the other end occasionally just to keep that quilting balanced, and then I will meet you back here. Okay, once you've got all the stitch lines going one way, we're going to start at the middle again and start sewing the lines of stitching going the other way. Again, starting at the middle of the piece and rotating which direction, like which end we start on, rolling up that piece as you need to so that it feeds through your machine. And don't forget to check the back side just to make sure you haven't accidentally sewn something you didn't mean to with that back lining. Just like so. So now we're going to sew all of these lines this way, and then I'll meet you back at the cutting table. All right, once everything is quilted, it's going to look like this. I have taken an iron and ironed over it, so my lines have all disappeared now. So now I just have my stitching lines, and then the back, I've got white thread in my bobbin, so you can see the back. That all quilted up really nicely for the lining on the inside. Yeah, I'm very pleased with how that looks. Okay. Once we've got it quilted, now it is time to cut out our sleeves. So we do this separately. I would do this different for each sleeve. So we're going to cut one out with the pattern up, and then the other one we're going to cut out with the pattern turned over, because we need mirrored sleeves. Don't make sure that you do that. So I'm just going to put this on and put this on grain. And I've got, again, I cut my squares on grain, so we've got everything nice and neat. Use my sew tights, making sure that all of my layers are, underneath at the edges. Okay, once I've got that secured, I'm now going to cut it out. Okay, and then we need to mark our notches, just clipping in like 1/8 of an inch. And there, we've got a sleeve cut out. Okay, so now our piece 4 sleeves are set and ready to go. Go ahead and do this to both sleeves, and then finish off your underarm seam allowances. So I'm binding mine, but if you're using a serger or whatever you're doing to finish off your seam allowances, go ahead and do that now. Again, I'm going to bind mine just like I showed you how I was doing that. So I'm going to go do that, and then I will meet you back at the sewing room. Okay, once we've got our sleeves quilted and I've bound the underarm edges, we are ready to attach the sleeves into the body of the jacket. So let's see here. This is the front of my sleeve. Let's lay this out correctly. So I'm going to lay out my jacket, one of the sides of my jacket, and I've got the back of the armscye here, and there's my 2 notches. Here's my shoulder seam. Here's my single notch on the front. And I'm going to take my sleeve and I am going to, we're sewing a convex curve to a concave curve. So I want to make sure I'm matching this up, but I'm going to turn my sleeve this way. And it is right sides together. And I'm just going to pin the single notch here at the top to my shoulder seam. And then my double notch here to this double notch. And then my underarm seams. And then on the other side, I'm going to pin my single notch to my single notch. And then match my underarm seams. All right, now let's go to the machine and sew this sleeve in. All right, so I've got a 2.5 stitch length back on my machine. I am sewing with the sleeve down against the feed dogs. I still have my walking foot on because I'm still working with that quilted fabric, and I just want everything to ease in nicely. I'll go back to a regular one here after we're finished working with the sleeve. But I'm just gonna start at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and we're just going to go very slowly, making sure that we are not catching anything that we don't mean to catch underneath. Matching up those raw edges. And we are easing the sleeve and that sleeve cap in a little bit. And I'm just going to stick my hands through the layers and kind of pull that sleeve back as we get to the top of that cap. Make sure that seam allowance stays open when you come to it. All right, now we're gonna go make sure we've got no puckers or anything. The sleeve all looks good. So let's do the same with the other side and I'll meet you back at the pressing station. Okay, once we've got those sleeves sewn in, those seam allowances are gonna get pressed towards the actual sleeve. But before we do that, you need to either finish those off with a serger or with binding. So I'm gonna sew mine together with binding. And like I'm doing everything else in this jacket. So I am going to sew my first pass on the sleeve side, open it up just like I showed you, and I'm going to sew at a 1/4 inch, and then I am going to wrap it, and it's going to get wrapped on both seam allowances, and I will wrap it and then top stitch it in place on the jacket side, because that is the seam allowance that will be facing up once the seam allowances are pressed. So let me go bind these seams and then I'll meet you back here. All right, once we've finished off that arm's eye bias binding, or if you're using a serge seam, whatever you're doing, once that is finished, we are now going to be sewing our side seams together. So we can take our jacket, right sides together, and I'm going to start pinning at my underarm here. And we are matching our underarm seams, and again, that seam allowance should be going towards the sleeve. So we may have a fair bit of bulk that's there at that underarm seam. So I'm going to put a pin on either side of that. And then I'm matching my dart seam here with that notch that I marked with a pin, remember? Because we lost our notch when we bound our side seams. And then our hems should match up. It's a big pin. All right. And now I'm going to go back to the machine, and at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm going to start at the hem of the jacket, sew to the underarm, pivot, and then sew all the way to the hem of the sleeve. And let's do that. I'm going to do that on both sides, and then I'll meet you back here. Okay, once our underarm seams are all sewn, we are now going to press those seam allowances open. So I've got a seam roll here, but again, a rolled up towel will work just fine. We're getting kind of the shape of a jacket now. So let's just press those seams open. All right, do that for the other side seam, and then I'll meet you back here for the cuffs. All right, we now can set our jacket aside for a minute because we're going to be working on the cuffs. So we need piece 5, which is our cuff piece, and we need to cut 2 out of the ribbing. And what we're going to be doing here, this is right side. I need to mark wrong side because, again, I don't know that you guys can see that real clearly. Wrong side, wrong side. So we're going to be taking these pieces, we'll just take one here, and we're going to match the notches. So these are the shorter ends. We're going to match those together, right sides together. And again, you do want to make sure you're using ribbing with good recovery, meaning it snaps back to its regular size again. And we are now going to sew this seam. Now the instructions have you just using your regular straight stitch, because the reason that's okay to do that on this knit is that this is a vertical stitch. So the horizontal stitches in and of, like if it's knit sewing to knit, horizontal stitches can be a problem. Now we are sewing a lot of knit to woven. So while we are stretching the knit to fit the woven, we don't have to worry about the pop stitches because the woven is gonna, when we're stretching the knit, the stitch is gonna have that looseness and that elasticity in it, so we don't have to worry about using a zigzag stitch. But if you would like, and I'll go ahead and do it on this one, you can use a real narrow zigzag stitch for this seam, which would be like a 0.5 width and a 2.5 length. Otherwise, you can just use a regular straight stitch, a 2.5 millimeter length. But we're going to sew this seam at 1/2 inch. So let's do that on both cuff pieces, and I'll meet you back here. All right, so there I have sewn my seam, and I did give it a little zigzag stitch, but again, you don't have to. And I didn't change needles. I did have my walking foot on, so that helps a lot, but I just kept the regular Microtex in. Typically, you would use a ballpoint or a stretch needle for knits. All right, I'm just going to press this seam open. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold it in half, wrong sides together. So I'm going to take my tape off because I don't want the tape stuck in there. So wrong sides together, match those seams, and then match my raw edges to create that cuff piece. Now you can, if you want, go back to the machine and you can baste those 2 raw edges together if you're having a hard time keeping those raw edges together. Those basting stitches very well might pop as you're sewing your cuff into your jacket, but that's fine. Don't worry about that because it's done its job, which was just to baste those layers together until it could get sewn. All right. So now we have the cuff. Do that to the second cuff, and then I'll meet you back here. All right, so I've got my jacket, I've got my cuff pieces. We're going to sew the cuff into our sleeve hem. So I've got my jacket is still inside out, and I'm going to take my cuff that is wrong sides together, so either side could be considered right side, and we're going to slide it inside here. So right sides together. I am matching up that seam on the cuff to my underarm seam. And we are going to have to stretch this a little in order for it to fit. So just kind of give it a little stretch. And then we will pin that and or clip it in this case. All right, so let's go to the machine and let's sew this cuff in. Okay, so I'm stitching this cuff in with my 2.5 straight stitch. I still have a walking foot on because it really just helps with working with all these layers. So I'm gonna start sewing just with a straight stitch, and I've got my cuff up on the machine. I wanna make sure that those seam allowances are open underneath, and we're just gonna go very carefully all the way around this armhole with that 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'm stretching that cuff as I go so that it fits into that. Yeah. All right, so we've got that all sewn in. Let's do the other side, and then meet me back at the pressing station, and we're gonna bind this seam. All right, once our cuff is sewn on to the end of our sleeve, you can finish this off with a serger. However you're finishing your seam allowances, I'm gonna be binding it. And this is a little different than binding just the flat seams like we've been doing, so I am gonna show you how to do that. I am going to start, and I'm gonna pin first to the sleeve side because this is all gonna get pressed up into the arm. So I am starting here at the underarm. I am unfolding all of my folds, and I'm gonna fold it, I don't know, 1/4 inch towards the wrong side. Line that up with my seam. Break a clip. Now we can just pin this in place, and I'll take you with me when we go to sew this in. So now we can just pop in a few more pins. Okay, I grabbed at the last bit of my bias binding. It's gonna, look how short it is. Just like a 1/2 inch too short. That's too bad. Okay, we're gonna do this. I'm just gonna get a longer piece, and then I'll meet you back at the sewing machine and show you how we're gonna sew this in. All right, let's sew this in. So I've got this folded a 1/2 or I don't know, 1/4 inch or so to the wrong side, and I'm lining up my raw edges here. And we are going to be sewing this down at a 1/4 inch. Just doing a straight stitch. And you may have to stretch things just a little bit as you go because that knit band had to be stretched to fit into the woven part of the sleeve. And it may be pulling the sleeve, in a little bit, which is what it's supposed to do. But we do want this as flat as possible as we're sewing this binding in. All right, when we get back around, we've got this little area that we folded over. I'm going to cut this. I always leave my bias binding long and then cut it as I'm sewing. We do want to cut this and so that it overlaps that folded edge just a little bit. Okay, then we're going to backstitch. Okay, so now when we press everything up and away and then wrap it, that edge is finished off really nicely. Okay, so now you finish it the way we've done the other binding. So now press it up and then press it over to the right side, top stitch it down, and you've got your seam bound. All right, once your cuff is bound or finished off with a serger or whatever, you're gonna stick your towel or seam roll, whatever you're using. We're gonna press that seam allowance up towards the sleeve. So when we turn it right side out, that's what we've got there at the bottom of the sleeve. Okay, do that to the other side, and then I'll meet you back here and we're gonna work on the neckband. All right, next we're gonna work on our neckband. So we need piece 6, and we've got one of these cut out from ribbing. And we're going to take this piece, and this is the right side. I'm not gonna put tape on it because we're getting ready to fold it wrong sides together. This is the right side, this is the wrong side. We are folding it wrong sides together in half, and you're gonna match all of those notches. Okay, now we're gonna go to the machine and we are going to baste, and I'm gonna use like a 4.0 millimeter stitch length, and I'm gonna baste at like 3/8 of an inch, so within the seam allowance, along that cut edge. Those basting stitches will pop when we're sewing this into the jacket, but that's fine. We just need them to keep these layers together while we're putting the neckband in. So let me do that and I'll be right back. Okay, once we've got those raw edges basted together, we need our jacket. And we're going to be sewing this into the neckline of our jacket. We are going to be matching raw edges together. This notch here is center back, so I'm going to match that. And I'm going to use clips for this. And then our other notch is going to be here at our shoulder seam. We do want to make sure that that shoulder seam is pressed open. Then this notch to this shoulder seam. And we are stretching this neckband a little bit to fit. And then here at the front, we are matching, so we're following along our raw edge, and we're going to match this tip right there to center front, matching that raw edge. But I want you to note that when we are sewing our 1/2 inch seam allowance, that this is, that we will be sewing off of, because it comes down here, we will be sewing just on the front of the jacket for about 1/2 inch there at center front on both sides. And then I'm just going to pop some clips in between. So here at the end, you've just got, it's like a convex to a concave curve, just right there at that end. And I'll take you with me when we sew this in so you see what I mean. Okay, so let's go over to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew this neckband in. All right, so I have my stitch length set at 2.5, and I'm lining up my raw edges with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And again, when I start sewing, I'm not going to be sewing on the neckband yet, even though the neckband matches the raw edge up here at the top. And that is, oops, intentional. And I need to actually be sewing on the fabric. That is intentional. We want that neckband to kind of die in that seam there. And we still have a facing that's going to get sewn on. And we will finish off our, this seam we're sewing right now in a later step. All right, so we're just sewing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Stretch that neckband as you need in order for it to fit. And make sure that your shoulder seams are pressed open when you get to those. And then we've sewn off that edge, so there's still like a 1/2 inch there in between the two edges again. Okay? All right, make sure you don't have any, make sure your seam allowances at your shoulders are pressed open, and they are. Again, this seam allowance will get finished off at a later step. So now we can move on to our bands. So let's go back to the pressing station for the next step. Okay, now we need pieces 8, which is our front lower band, and piece 7, which is our 7 and 8, which is our back lower band. And we are going to open up our, I will mark these the wrong sides on this because that will be helpful. Piece 7, I'm going to lay this out right side up. And then piece 8, all right, piece 8, we are going to put this right sides together, and we are matching up those notches. On either side. And again, just like with the cuff, the instructions are having you do just a straight stitch, and that's fine. You can totally do that. Or if you want to do a zigzag stitch, you can do a 2.5 length, 0.5 width zigzag for this seam. But we are just going to sew our lower front bands, or front lower bands, to our back lower band. So I'm going to sew these two side seams right here, and I'll be right back. All right, once we've sewn those seams, we are going to press them open. All right, next we're going to do some stay stitching. Up here in the top corner on piece 8, we're going to sew the seam allowance, which is a 1/2 inch, about an inch away from the corner. We're going to sew to the corner and then down up here in the top. And we're going to do that on both sides. And we are also going to do that on the front of our jacket, where we've got our tab here. We're going to sew about an inch away from the corner and down, just using a 2.5 millimeter stitch. I'm going to do a stay stitch at 1/2 inch on both of those inner corners as well. So let me go sew those, and I'll show you what that looks like. So as you can see on the top right-hand corners, or top, not right-hand corners, the top corners on both of piece 8, which is the front lower band, I've got a little 1/2 inch seam allowance. I've sewn in that stay stitch there on either end, right there. And then on the coat, I have done that also at the inner the inner corner here as well, pivoting at that point. So what I'm going to do is, on both sides, is I am going to trim to, but not through, that line of stitching just on the jacket side. On both sides of the jacket. Just like so, okay? So what we are going to do first is we are going to pin right sides together our band. I'm going to start on one side, and I'm just going to put a pin through this corner here on the ribbing, and then I'm going to pop it through and match it to the corner here on the jacket. And then I'm going to match my side seams. And center back, and I marked center back when I was cutting things out. And then the same on the other side. All right, and now I'm gonna sew right at that point all the way across the bottom, and we're gonna stop right at this point. So let's go do that. All right, and I'm even keeping my tab going the correct way, even though I've cut into that corner. I'm just gonna lower my needle right at that point. And I am going to sew with 2.5 millimeter straight stitch. I'm gonna back stitch there at that point, and we are sewing at 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I am going to be stretching the ribbing because it's just a little bit shorter than the bottom of the jacket. And I wanna make sure that my seam allowances stay open when I get to those. And when we get to the other corner, we want to stop right on that corner as well. We also want to make sure we don't get our pocket caught in that as we are sewing. And I think we're good. And we can check and make sure that we've started and stopped right where we would like to. All looks good and in order there. All right, let's go back to the pressing station, and I'll show you how we're going to turn the corner. All right, now that we've got this sewn, I'm going to pull my tape off for wrong side on this bands. We are going to do some pressing. And we are going to press this band down and press that seam allowance up towards the body. We can kind of move that pocket out of the way as we go. And we will finish this seam allowance later in another step. And then I'm going to press from both the wrong side and the right side. All right, once we have pressed that up, we are going to come over here to our side. So we've got our little tab that's now hanging down here. We're going to just take the front of the jacket, turn it over on itself, and now we have got our right sides together on that turn. And if we match our notches that are here on those ends, and the bottom should match up nicely. And then up here, we should have our point right where we stopped sewing when we were doing the other side, when we were doing the long length. So now we're going to go back to the machine, and we're going to start where we stopped, and we're going to sew all the way down this seam on both sides. So let's go do that. All right. So now we are going to start sewing where we stopped. So I'm going to just plant my needle, back stitch, sew along that stay stitch line, and all the way to the bottom. Back stitch again. Like so, so that when we turn everything back right side out, And once we get everything a nice press, that is what we have got. Okay, let's do that to both sides and I'll meet you back at the pressing station. Okay, once we've got that all sewn, we can lay out our front here and press everything nice and flat from the wrong side. And from the right side. And if you've got any stay stitching visible, you can go ahead and remove that now. All right, so our lower band is partially in. Okay, our next step is zipper. So go ahead and grab your separating zipper for the front and I will meet you back here. All right, so now it is time to work on our zipper. So I've got my 22-inch separating zipper, so when this unzips, it comes apart. And I've gone ahead and I've stuck Wonder tape to either side of the zipper tape. It's just so much easier to use the tape than it is to use pins when you're working with a zipper. So the paper is still on the glue, but I have gone ahead and put that Wonder tape on there. And then obviously we need our jacket. All right, so we're going to start with the, I guess, right side when worn side of the jacket that we're gonna, we're basting the zipper in first. So I'm gonna turn my collar piece down. Let me put the rest of the jacket out of the way here. All right, so we've got jacket right side up here. Again, this collar piece I want to go down. And we are going to be taking our zipper and putting it right sides together and I'm going to glue it in place. But there's a few things that we want to take note of. We want the center of our zipper here, so right in the center of these teeth, to hit right at that 1/2 inch seam allowance down from the top. You remember when we sewed where there's no neckband there? We want the center of the teeth to hit right at the edge of that neckband there at that point. And I'm actually going to unzip my zipper a little bit just so we can make sure we get that in there. The other thing I really want to make sure of, and I'm going to leave my zipper completely zipped while we are doing this, but the other thing is that I want the bottom of my zipper stop here to stop right at the notch that we've got here on that front piece. Okay, so those are the two things that have to happen. And I'm actually going to start at the bottom. So I'm going to pull off my paper here. All right. And I'm going to start by lining up this bottom again of my zipper stop right at that notch. And my zipper is fat, so I want to make sure that it's going to extend past center front. I've got a bigger seam allowance than 1/2 inch from the edge of my zipper tape to the center of my teeth. So we're just going to, I want the center of my teeth to match up and it's okay if your zipper extends past the top, and mine does. Again, we want that neckband down. All right, now we're going to go to the machine and we're going to baste this in place right close to our zipper teeth, but with a basting stitch, because we would want to make sure that everything is nice and even before we go back and sew the zipper facing on. All right, so let's go to the machine and do that. All right, so I've got my zipper foot on, and I'm going to be writing it right along the edge of the teeth. And I'm going to move my needle actually over a little bit further, I think. And I'm taking my stitch length up to 5 because I really am just basting this in place, just in case we need to move anything. So now I'm just going to sew down my zipper. All right, just like that. Okay, let's go back to the pressing station for the next step. All right, now before we open this up to sew on the zipper on the other side, I'm going to turn this right side up, and I want to mark a couple of things. I want to mark where my where this seam allowance here is, right here where the oh my gosh, the neckband goes. So I'm going to mark that across my tape. And then I'm going to do that. I want to do that on both the top or both sides. So I want that side to match up when we sew it to the other side. And I'm going to do the same thing. Well, I don't need to do it down here at the bottom. Never mind, because our stop is our end point. Okay, so that's going to be important when we are lining it up. Okay. So we've got that sewn. Now we are going to do the other side. So now we can take our zipper, unzip it, and it comes apart like so. And now it is time to flip this over this way. I'm going to flip this around so it's easier for you to see. And it's the same drill. We want our neckband to be down. And we are going to be gluing it. And again, I want to make sure, so I marked that line here at the top. So I want to make sure that that line is lining up with this line of stitching that's right here. So center of teeth need to match up with the edge of the neckband here. And then I want this line that I drew to match up with that seam as well. So that when the coat is zipped up, everything matches. We don't have any weird jog. And then I want to make sure that the bottom of my stops right at that notch. I'm going to pull my zipper. My zipper is just a little bit long. And that's okay. It's okay if your zipper is long. All right. We're going to push that into place. Now we're going to go back to the machine, and just like I did on the other side, I'm going to baste this side of the zipper. So let me go do that and I'll be right back. All right, so now we've got it sewn in on both sides. So now, again, it's too long right now, but that's okay. We will fix that later. Now we just want to zip it up and check and make sure that everything is lined up just like we want it to be. Well, maybe. So go ahead and zip it back up. All right. So when I'm looking down here, this is what I'm looking for. When When I'm looking down here at the bottom, I want to make sure that my notches are lined up, and they are. They look beautiful. And then I'm also up here, I'm making sure that my seam that goes across my neckline is even, and this looks great. So I'm feeling very good about both of those things. So I don't think I need to unpick. I've also sewn up some thread. I don't think I need to unpick anything, which is perfect. So the zipper looks good. All right, let's set this aside for a minute, and we are going to work on our zipper facings next. All right, so the final piece that we need for our jacket, and that's piece 9, which is our zipper facing. And I'm going to show you a way to do a really nice clean finish on this. However, if you are finishing things off with serger, or you just want things bound, you can, at this point, go ahead and fuse your interfacing to the back of your zipper facings. And if that's the case, you need to finish off this longer edge however you would like. So whether that is with a serger, this edge here, whether that's with a serger, or if you want to bind it, or however you're doing it, go ahead and do that step now. If you would like to know how to do the clean finish though, that's what we're going to be doing now. So we are going to be putting our facings, or our interfacing, pick one side here. This is the right side. Let me put some tape on the wrong side so you can easily see. I'm going to be putting my facing and my interfacing together, right sides together. Right side of the interfacing is the non-glue side. So it is the soft side. So my glue side is up right now. Okay? Just like this. And I'm going to put some pins in. And we are going to sew these together. So again, right sides together. So I've got the non-glue side together with the right side of the facing fabric, so I can feel my glue side is up here. So let's go to the machine, and I'm just gonna sew my 1/2 inch seam allowance all up this longer side, and I'll be right back. All right, once we've sewn that at that 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm gonna come back and trim that to at least half the width. All right, now we're going to do some pressing and fusing. So first, I'm going to now this is a pretty straight seam, so it makes it pretty easy, but I'm going to kind of understitch a little bit, and then I'm just going to take the tip of my iron, and I'm just pressing that onto that seam allowance. I don't want to accidentally fuse my fusible to the ironing board. So I want to be very careful. Then I'm going to flip it over to the wrong side. This is the wrong side. I got my tape there. And now we can fuse this in place. And this gives a really clean finish to the right side. So now you're just fusing per normal. And there you go, a finished, cleanly done facing. So this side gets sewn to our zipper. So do that to both sides, or however you're doing your zipper facing, and I'll meet you back here to install them. Okay, now it's time to install our zipper fly. So I'm gonna unzip my zipper. And I'm gonna open this back out again. So now my zipper is facing wrong side up. And I'm going to lay one of my facings down that is right sides together. Now, again, with my raw edge is gonna match the raw edge of center front. This is much shorter than the jacket, and that's okay. But we're gonna line this up down here to our hem, okay? Again, this is much shorter. It's not even coming close to hitting the neckline, but that's what we want. Okay. And then we're just gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew it at 1/2 inch seam allowance just across this facing piece. And then I will be right back. All right, so once we have got that sewn across the bottom, you will need to finish off that seam allowance somehow. So whether that's with a zigzag stitch, I just used a serger, and you just need to finish off that edge. And we're doing this to both sides. So I've got that just finished off. Next, we are going to be pressing that seam allowance up towards the facing. So I just want to press that seam allowance towards the facing. And now we're going to take our facing. Again, our zipper is still folded out, so this is the wrong side of the zipper. And we're going to line up the neck edge now up here with the neck edge of the jacket, making sure that our neck band is still facing down. So we are sandwiching the neckband between the facing and the neckline of the jacket. And I'm just going to pop in a couple of pins. Matching up those raw edges. And then when we go to the machine to sew this neckline, I'm actually going to flip it over and I'm going to stitch along that previous stitch line when I sewed the neckband to the jacket. Okay, so we're going to sew right along that edge as we go. All right, so let's, I'm going to pin this on the other side and then let's go to the sewing machine and we'll do that together. Okay, so I am starting at my shoulder seam here. And again, I've got my 2.5 millimeter stitch length on. And I'm just going to stitch right along that previous stitch line. When I get to the teeth, I don't want to hit those with the machine. So I'm actually going to hang crank. Even though these are nylon teeth, which does make it a little bit easier, I want my needle to not hit one of the nylon teeth like it's wanting to do there. I want it to sandwich in between so that I don't break a needle. So sometimes that looks like a weird stitch going over the zipper teeth. And then we've caught everything on this side. Looks good. And then this neckline looks good. So go ahead and do that to the other side as well. You'll be starting from this end and going this way on the other side. And then I will meet you back at the pressing station and we're going to trim our zipper teeth and sew our facing to center front finally. All right. So we have our facing fixed here at the top and at the bottom. So now it's time to sew it down center front. But before we do that, we can trim off any excess zipper tape that we've got. Make sure your pull is down below your stitch line here. If not, you're going to have to unpick and pull the pull down. You want to make sure that your pull is not on the part that you're going to cut off. And I'm only saying that because I have done that. So I'm going to take crappy scissors, these are the zipper scissors, and I'm going to trim my zipper tape flush with the top of the jacket here. Just like so on both sides. Okay, throw that away. All right, so for our next trick, we're going to be sewing our front down here to our zipper tape. So we've done the bottom, and now we're going to start here at the bottom of the where the tab, where that folds over on itself at the notch. And if you, on the side that you're using your pole, you're gonna have to pull that pole out of the way. We will have to get kind of creative as we go. And we're just going to pin. And I will do the side with the zipper pull. The side without the zipper pull is actually pretty easy because you don't have to move anything out of the way. But I'm just gonna pin this in place. And while most of the time I sew with the facing, well, I think I will sew with the facing up. Yeah. Never mind. We're going to sew with the facing up. All right. So now we're going to go to the machine and we're going to sew starting here at the bottom at our 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to put a zipper foot on, and we're going to sew all the way up center front, all the way up to the top here. So let's go to the machine and do that next. All right, so I've got my zipper foot on. We're going to back stitch here at the bottom. And I can feel where those zipper teeth are. And so I am just riding my zipper foot here right along those teeth. Oh, hold on. I see a pocket piece that snuck in there that should not be in there. As with anything, make sure that, oh, and there goes my. All right, as with anything, make sure that you aren't sewing something that you don't mean to sew on the underside. So I am going to pick back up where I left off there. Okay, I can feel my zipper pull is right there, and it is super bulky. So I am going to stop, because I've got enough room for it to go down. Stop, and I'm going to raise my presser foot, and I'm just going under here where that zipper pull is, and I am unzipping it. You may have to pull everything off the machine to get that out of the way. I was able to just scoot that on by. And then we'll continue on our merry little way. And then we're back stitching up here at the top. All right. Go ahead and do that to the other side, and then I will meet you back at the pressing station for the next steps. Okay, so now that we have everything sewn down, we can come back and we can trim some of the fullness, some of our corners. Make sure everything is sewn correctly. Make sure you didn't accidentally sew your pockets into the zipper. We will secure those at the end, but now is not the time. All right. Once we've done that, and once we've got everything trimmed, if you've got really bulky fabric, you may want to grade your seam allowance here as well. You could totally do that. But once we've done that, we're actually going to go back to the machine and we're going to understitch. So I'm going to go in and I am going to sew the seam allowance, this seam allowance that we just sewed to my facing. So I'm gonna pull everything away and I'm gonna sew right along that seam line, that fold line on the facing, making sure that seam allowance is against the facing. I'm gonna do that as far as I can get into this. I'm not gonna be able to do the whole way down, but let's go do that really quickly. All right, so I'm just gonna shove everything under here. And again, I'm sewing, I'm keeping my zipper foot on just because I'm afraid, even though I'm not too close to the zipper, I don't want any of that bulk to throw anything off. So I am gonna scooch my needle over a little. I'm just running now my zipper foot along that seam line, and we are just gonna sew right along that fold line, and I'm pulling that away, making sure that the seam allowance is where it should be. I can move my zipper pull out of the way. I do see that my basting stitches from when I basted my zipper in place are showing. You could totally go and pull those out. And just go as far as you can get into. And then back stitch. All right, do the other side, and then I'll meet you back at the pressing station. Okay, once we have that zipper facing understitched, is what I'm trying to say, we can pull our zipper back through. You can poke out any corners that might need a little help, although usually that zipper tape really helps pull those out. Our neckline is going to go down. So our next step is that we need to finish our neckline. And however you want to do that. So if you are using a serger, you can totally do it that way. Oh, I've got thread caught in my zipper. Never good. Okay, if you are, like I said, if you've got a serger, totally can do that. Let's look at this together. I am using binding, as we know, so I am actually going to finish off the binding, and I'm going to sew it to the jacket side first and then wrap my binding over onto the neckband, because this is going to get pressed down when all is said and done. But what the trick here is that we want our binding or your serging or whatever to go about 1.5 inches into the facing on each side, so that you don't see the where it finishes. So I am going to really quickly go with my binding, and I'm going to finish off this neck edge the same way I finished off all of these other seams, and do that, and then I will meet you back here. Okay, so when I bound this, I flipped my facings back down again, and I've taken it, I don't know, like 1.5 inches inside over that facing piece to wrap that seam, just like we've done on all of the other seams, so that then when everything gets put back in place, and when we give everything a good press, our seams are nice and finished. Okay, so now let's give that a good press. Do that over my ham. All right, so there we have our finished neck seam. All right, we're almost to the end. We're almost to the end, folks. Give everything a good press, and you can go ahead and press down your zipper really well, and then I'll be back and we will be finishing off the bottom band. All right, we're so close to being finished. So our next step is that we've got to fold up this bottom band and get it finished off. So super, super close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be pinning the seam allowance. So the bottom edge here that is free, I'm folding this up wrong sides together, and I am clipping it, not pinning it, to the seam allowance where we attached it to the bottom of the jacket. And we're going to be sewing back on that same line that we sewed before. So I'm pushing the body of the jacket away. And I'm matching my side seams and center back. And then put a couple pins in between. All right, now let's go to the machine and let's sew this together. Okay, so I'm pulling kind of things out of the way. I can see exactly, you know, that corner where we clipped into. I have my walking foot on only because I'm working with knit fabric, and I don't know. I just wanted to err on the, I don't want anything to get all twisty and weird. So I'm starting right at that edge. I've got my jacket up because I am sewing right on that previous stitch line with a straight stitch, a 2.5 millimeter stitch, and just going the whole bottom of the coat here. Okay, once you have finished sewing that seam, you now need to finish the seam. So whether that is, if you're finishing things off with bias binding or with a serger, or however you're finishing your seams off, go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and finish mine off with the bias binding. And again, these seams get pressed up towards the body of the jacket. So just keep that in mind as you're going. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'll meet you back at the pressing station for the very last step. All right, so once that bottom band is sewn, and now we can come back, and I finished off the binding. I went inside underneath that facing a little bit on both sides, just so it has a nice clean finish. But now we can just kind of hit everything. We've already pressed that seam allowance up at the bottom of the jacket, but now that we have the band all finished, we can just really get it good. Our final step, and we'll want to give this all a really good press when we're completely finished. But our final step is that we are going to tack our pocket in place here, just with some hand stitches to keep it nice and tucked away. So what we want to do, pull this pull out of the way, is lay your jacket out nice and flat so you're facing, everything is as it should be. Give it a good press. Tuck all those pocket pieces in. And we're just going to tack the facing in place at the top of the pocket and at the bottom of the pocket. So we are going to grab a needle. And I'm just going to do this double. When I do buttons and stuff like that, I will put another line of thread through there, but I think just doing this double will be fine. We just want to keep that, there's no stress on this seam. It's just to keep your pocket tucked away so it doesn't try and escape. All right, I will zoom in. So up here at the top, I'm actually going to start up underneath the facing so that I can bury my tail there. And I'm going to rotate this because I am right-handed and I want to be able to go right to left. Hold on. Okay. All right. Now that I've got this up, I'm just going to take a few stitches into the pocket and into the facing. Ouch. Just do this 3 times. And then before I close up this loop the last time, I'm just going to take my thread and go through it once, twice, so that that knots that off. And then I'm going to bury the tail. And then I'm going to do that same thing kind of at the bottom of the pocket. Again, you want to make sure everything's laying nice and flat. So we're going to do it down here at the bottom of the pocket. Again, I'm just going to bury my tail and then grab the pocket and the facing and go through this 3 times. All right, do that on both sides and then I'll meet you back here. All right, once you have everything, your pockets all tacked away, everything has been sewn, it is time to give your Kimball a really good press and then wear it with pride. All right, per normal, if you've got any questions at all about this sew along, please leave those down below. I will answer those as soon as possible. Otherwise, happy sewing.
And there we have it, our finished Kimball Bomber Jacket with our beautiful quilted sleeves, our zippered welt pockets that are finished off so beautifully on the inside. I just think, and with all the binding, I just think that this is a really beautifully, if I do say so myself, beautifully well-made jacket with all the different details. As always, if you have any questions about the construction of this jacket, please leave those down below. I am happy to answer those. And as a reminder, the Kimball Bomber Jacket is a Cashmerette Club pattern. It's one of the older ones, which means you will need to have the all access tier of their club in order to have access to this pattern. It's a really great deal. Definitely go take a look at all of the bells and whistles that come with that all access tier. I've been a part of it almost since the inception, and it is something that I pay for with my own money every single year. So I find it very, very, very worth the cost. If more so, actually. So anyway, definitely something to go take a look at. All right, again, questions down below if you have them. I hope you've enjoyed sewing along with me. And until next time, happy sewing.